As the Australians say, g'day, mate, and welcome to a Dr. Jam's Jam, where we blend up energy, carbon, forest, agriculture, and waste, and hopefully deliver you a smoothie that gives you some value. This is part 2 of our 3-part series on thinking about forest carbon like financial statements. Today is balance sheet day. Let's jam. A balance sheet summarizes a company's assets, liabilities, and shareholders' equity at a specific point in time. For a company, we want to increase the shareholders' equity. In carbon terms, that is the amount of carbon that a forest has removed from the atmosphere over time. To consider a balance sheet from a carbon perspective, let's think about carbon in the atmosphere as a liability and carbon not in the atmosphere as an asset. These assets can be carbon stored in the forest, including in the above ground tree, the tree's roots below, and the soils. We can also consider the carbon stored in long-lived solid wood products, such as buildings and furniture. The oldest wooden buildings on Earth are in Japan and over 600 years old. Carbon stored for that amount of time, plus the time it spent while the tree was living. That's a long time. Liabilities are represented by carbon released from fossil fuels to manage, harvest, and process wood. It's the carbon we put into the atmosphere. Carbon losses from the forest represent a reduction in assets. Essentially, carbon in the atmosphere is a liability. When we run a company, we are primarily looking to increase shareholder equity. In this case, shareholder equity is the amount of carbon that a forest can keep out of the atmosphere. We can call that carbon equity. If the forest is in a perfect balance, the carbon equity is equal to the assets, i.e., the amount of carbon stored in the forest. However, there is nothing we can do to increase carbon equity. We can't increase the amount of carbon in the forest. All the trees are mature. While some trees are growing, others are dying or dead and losing carbon. If we want to increase the carbon equity from this forest, we actually have to remove some of the trees. This results in 3 things. Number 1, there are asset losses in the form of carbon released to the atmosphere from the use of wood for energy and short-lived products like paper. Number 2, some of the in-forest carbon assets become long-lived solid wood products where they're storing carbon. And number 3, space is created for the forest to regrow, as in rebuild the in-forest carbon asset base. As we manage and harvest, the asset base slowly builds if carbon stays in the long-lived solid wood products, like buildings and quality furniture. When we use wood biomass for energy, carbon dioxide is released back into the atmosphere where it came from. That results in a reduction in the carbon asset. However, it's important to note, using biomass instead of fossil fuels, we are limiting the liabilities in the form of fossil fuel carbon dioxide. However, this is when things get really interesting. We can avoid the carbon asset losses associated with wood for energy and short-lived products like paper by putting the carbon dioxide emissions permanently underground. We can continuously increase our assets and therefore our carbon equity in perpetuity. This generation of bioenergy with carbon and capture and storage is called BECCS and is the most powerful approach we have for using forests to remove carbon from the atmosphere permanently. Over time, the power of timber harvest to increase the carbon equity, in other words, the amount of carbon not in the atmosphere, is clear. If we protect forests with no harvest, there is a maximum amount of carbon that can be stored on the land. The asset does not grow, and the carbon equity does not grow. It is what they call in the startup world a walking dead company. In comparison, timber harvest for solid wood products and BECCS, bioenergy with carbon capture and storage, allows that land to be used to grow more trees while ensuring the carbon that was in the harvested trees does not enter the atmosphere. This means we are growing the carbon equity over time as more and more carbon is removed from the atmosphere. From a climate perspective, we should always aim to increase the carbon equity, the amount of carbon not in the atmosphere. In fact, now we have a way with BECCS to reverse climate change. Even if we ever get to net zero, carbon storage in solid wood products and underground using BECCS is something we would want to keep doing to bring atmospheric CO2 concentrations back down to historical levels. If you didn't fall asleep watching this video about carbon equity and balance sheets, check out the other 2 parts of our series on thinking about forest carbon like financial statements. Keep on jamming!